California, a state drenched in sunshine, a promise of golden dreams, but even in paradise, darkness finds a way. It began with whispers, strangers in the night, things missing from homes, fear, a creeping shadow. No one knew his name, but they would come to know his deeds. The East Area Rapist, the original Night Stalker, the Diamond Visitor, and finally, the Golden State Killer. He haunted the state for over a decade, a spectre slipping through open windows, leaving behind a trail of terror and despair. This is his story. June 1976. The air hung heavy with summer heat and growing fear. Sacramento County became his hunting ground. He watched, he waited, his victims, none suspecting the horror that awaited. Method in the madness. He was meticulous, a master manipulator, his crimes planned and calculated. He began with homes empty and vulnerable, taking small trinkets, leaving behind a signature. Terror in Rancho, Cordova. Rancho, Cordova, a community, unaware of the darkness descending upon them. July 18th, 1976. He struck. His first attack, a young woman, home alone, her terrified screams swallowed by the night. Escalation. His crimes escalated from petty theft to brutal assaults. He terrorized his victims, binding them, blindfolding them, threatening their lives and the lives of their loved ones. He was in control. Imagine the sun setting, casting long, ominous shadows, the day's warmth fading away, replaced by a chill, not just of the evening air, but of fear. It seeped into every home, into every relationship. How do you trust when the monster hides in plain sight? Neighbors, once friendly, now eye each other with suspicion. Was he among them? Hiding in plain sight, a community once vibrant, now living in the grip of fear, their lives put on hold by an unseen terror that walked among them. Sleep, once a sanctuary, now a torment. Every creak, every groan, a potential threat. Doors bolted, windows locked, weapons kept close at hand, but the fear remained a constant companion. Their homes no longer felt like their own. But even in the darkest hour, hope flickers. Survivors sharing their stories, supporting each other, refusing to be silenced. Law enforcement working tirelessly, chasing down leads, determined to bring the Golden State Killer to justice. The hunt was far from over. Years turned into decades. The case grew cold. Leads ran dry. Witnesses offered little help. Frustration mounted for law enforcement and the families of the victims, who yearned for answers, for justice. The Golden State Killer had vanished into thin air, or so it seemed. Thousands of hours spent investigating, analyzing, searching for a pattern, a connection, anything that could lead them to the killer. But he was a ghost, leaving behind a trail of shattered lives and very few clues. The investigation seemed impossible, like catching smoke. Section 3, The Shadow of Doubt. Doubt began to creep in. Would the Golden State Killer ever be caught? Had he simply vanished, or was he hiding in plain sight? The years wore on and the case faded from the headlines. But for the victims and their families, the pain never went away. Section 4. Hope Rekindled. Then, in the new millennium, a breakthrough in DNA technology offered a glimmer of hope. Could this be the key to unlocking the mystery that had haunted California for so long? The possibility of justice flickered once more. Section 1. DNA. A silent witness speaks. For years, the killer's DNA lay dormant, a silent witness to his crimes. But now technology had caught up, and the very evidence that he thought would protect him would become his undoing. Investigators turned to a revolutionary new tool, genealogical DNA databases. Could they find a match? Could they finally unmask the Golden State Killer? Section 2. The Genealogy Trail. In the age of digital information, the quest to uncover one's roots has never been more accessible. Genealogy websites have become treasure troves of historical data, allowing individuals to trace their lineage back through the centuries. But these platforms are not just for hobbyists. They have become invaluable tools for law enforcement as well. The search began online, in the vast digital family trees of genealogy websites. Investigators, armed with the DNA of an unknown suspect, turned to these databases in hopes of finding a match. The process was meticulous, requiring careful input of genetic data and cross-referencing with millions of profiles. Investigators carefully inputted the killer's DNA into the databases, looking for any potential family connections. Each entry was a step closer to uncovering the truth. The DNA, a silent witness to the crime, held the key to unlocking the mystery. The team knew that even a partial match could lead them to a relative, and from there they could narrow down their search. It was a long shot, but it was their best hope. And then a hit. The tension in the room was palpable as the results came in. A partial match had been found, linking the suspect to a distant relative. This breakthrough was the first glimmer of hope in a case that had long seemed unsolvable. A partial match to a distant relative. This small piece of the puzzle was enough to reignite the investigation. The team now had a new direction, a new path to follow. They began to build a family tree, meticulously mapping out connections and relationships. Each branch of the tree brought them closer to their target. It was a small lead, but it was enough to start building a family tree. The process was painstaking, requiring hours of research and analysis. Investigators pored over records, tracing the lineage of the partial match back through generations. They looked for patterns, commonalities, anything that could point them in the right direction. The family tree grew, each new connection bringing them one step closer to the suspect. The trail was long and winding, but with each new discovery, the team felt a renewed sense of purpose. They knew that the answers they sought were within reach, hidden within the branches of the Genealogy Trail. Section 3. A name from the past. The investigation took a dramatic turn from the sterile world of DNA to the dusty records of family histories. Investigators pored over birth certificates, marriage licenses, obituaries, any scrap of information that could help them trace the family line. And finally, after months of relentless investigation, a name emerged: Joseph James D'Angelo. Section 4. Justice at last? The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they do turn. For decades, the victims and their families waited, hoping for a resolution, a name, a face to the terror that haunted them. The Golden State Killer, a name that sent shivers down the spines of many, was finally about to be unmasked. D'Angelo, a former police officer, lived a quiet life in a quiet Sacramento suburb. His neighbors described him as an ordinary man, someone who kept to himself but was always polite. Little did they know, behind that facade of normalcy lay a dark and sinister past. Could this really be the monster they had been hunting for so long? The community was in disbelief. How could someone who seemed so ordinary be responsible for such heinous crimes? The fear and uncertainty that had gripped the state for years were now replaced with a mix of relief and shock. Investigators needed to be absolutely sure. They meticulously reviewed every piece of evidence, every lead and every clue. The pressure was immense, but the determination to bring justice was even stronger. They knew that one mistake could mean the difference between freedom and conviction. They placed D'Angelo under surveillance, collecting discarded DNA samples from his trash. Every move he made was watched. Every item he threw away was scrutinized. The investigators were patient, knowing that the key to solving this case lay in the smallest of details. And then the results came back. It was a match. The DNA evidence was irrefutable. The scientists had done their job, and now it was up to the legal system to do theirs. The sense of triumph was palpable, but so was the gravity of the situation. This was just the beginning of a long and arduous journey towards justice. After 40 years, the Golden State Killer had a name. The headlines screamed it, the news channels broadcasted it, and the world finally knew. Joseph James D'Angelo was the man behind the mask, the man who had eluded capture for so long. The relief was immense, but the pain of the past still lingered, and soon he would have his day in court. The courtroom was filled with anticipation, the air thick with tension. The victims and their families sat in the audience, their eyes fixed on the man who had caused them so much pain. The attorneys prepared their arguments, the judge readied his gavel, and the world watched, waiting for justice to be served. This was not just a trial, it was a moment of reckoning, a chance for closure, and a testament to the resilience of those who had suffered. The journey was far from over, but the first step had been taken. Justice, at last, was within reach. Section 1. A New Dawn. April 2018. The sun rises over California, casting a golden hue over a state that has been shrouded in darkness for far too long. The flashing lights of police cars pierce the early morning mist, signaling the end of an era of fear and uncertainty. The news ripples across California and beyond. Headlines scream the unbelievable truth. A man who had eluded justice for decades has finally been caught. The Golden State Killer, a name that had haunted the dreams of many, is now behind bars. The airwaves are filled with breaking news reports, each one dissecting the details of this monumental arrest. Joseph James D'Angelo is arrested, charged with a slew of crimes. His mugshot, a face that once blended into the crowd, now symbolizes the end of a nightmare. Footage of his arrest shows a frail old man, a stark contrast to the terror he once embodied. Courtroom sketches capture the gravity of the moment as justice begins to take its course. His reign of terror finally over. For years he had slipped through the cracks, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. Now the meticulous work of investigators has paid off. Evidence is collected, each piece a testament to the tireless efforts of those who refuse to let these crimes go unsolved. The police celebrate not just a victory for law enforcement, but for every victim who had waited for this day. But the journey is far from over. The courtroom becomes a battleground where the voices of the victims and their families echo through the halls of justice. Each testimony, a painful reminder of the lives forever altered. The police continue to investigate, uncovering more layers of a case that has spanned decades. The legal process is long and arduous, but it is a necessary path to ensure that every crime is accounted for. For his victims, the scars run deep. Memorials stand as silent witnesses to the lives lost and the pain endured. Emotional support groups offer a space for healing, but the journey is a long one. The faces of the victims and their families tell a story of resilience and strength, but also of a grief that time alone cannot heal. The physical and emotional toll immeasurable. Healthcare professionals work tirelessly to address the trauma that lingers. Therapy sessions become lifelines, offering a glimmer of hope in the darkness. Victim stories are shared, each one a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure and overcome. The road to recovery is long, but it is paved with the support of a community that refuses to forget. Yet there is a sense of relief, of closure. The news of D'Angelo's arrest brings a collective sigh of relief. Families embrace, finding solace in the fact that the man who caused so much pain is finally facing justice. The community, once gripped by fear, begins to heal. There is a newfound sense of safety, a belief that justice, though delayed, has not been denied. A monster unmasked and finally held accountable for his deeds. The image of D'Angelo being escorted into the courtroom is a powerful one. It signifies the end of a chapter, but also the beginning of another, one where justice prevails. The judge's gavel falls, and with it, the weight of years of suffering is lifted. The monster is unmasked, and the world watches as he is held accountable for his deeds. This is a new dawn, not just for California, but for every community that has been touched by his crimes.